Hi, all, Agent here, and I'm going to introduce you to Robocraft and some of the game mechanics. First, we are going to talk about the basics on how damage spreads. So I'm going to lay down a few blocks. Damage, when you think of how damage spreads in Robocraft, you need to think like electricity. It conducts through blocks that are connected. So if you have breaks in your connections, such as these prisms I'm going to put down, the damage cannot travel through those breaks. Now I've slowed this video down to 50% because I'm going to babble on for a minute here about damage, and found that it was way too short for as much as I wanted to explain, which isn't a whole lot. But anyway, so think of electricity when you think of how damage travels in Robocraft. Most weapons deal damage like this. The lasers, the Teslas, and the plasmas deal damage like that. The plasmas have a penetrative effect, but only because they fire multiple shots in quick succession. The actual damage still travels like electricity. So we're going to make some weird shapes here, and then I'm going to paint them, and I'm going to explain what each color means and how the damage works. And maybe this will help you protect parts in the future. I'm not going to go into very deep building strategies here. We're just going to cover the basics. So what I'm going to do, first I've got to turn mirror off. I'm going to paint one block red, and we're going to say that that red block is where, for instance, a laser shot impacted your bot. Now that block is probably going to be destroyed, but there's going to be leftover damage. So where that damage goes is dependent on how many connections to that block you have. So what I did here is I just painted the blocks that the remaining damage can travel to orange. The damage can't go anywhere else other than those 3 blocks because there is no connection to the red block. What I'm doing next is I'm painting the next set of blocks yellow, and that is where any additional damage could possibly travel to. The damage is assigned randomly to any connected block, except for railguns. They work different. We'll cover that in a different tutorial. Briefly, we'll just say that they have penetrative damage, and it's less like electricity and more like an actual railgun. So the damage can travel from the red block to the orange blocks. The red block is destroyed. Remaining damage is distributed to the orange blocks. Damage cannot jump from the red block to the yellow blocks or from the red block to the green blocks because there is no connection. It has to go red, orange, yellow, green. It can take any path that follows that order. And now we're going to add some blue just to kind of further things, but I think I'm getting the idea across here, and we don't need 50 million colors. So it is very possible for damage to go to the middle block there that's yellow in between everything, or it could go straight over to the prism that's yellow on the front right corner at the bottom of the screen. It's assigned randomly, so you don't know where it's going to go through these connections. Like I said, it cannot go straight back this line. It cannot go from red to orange to green. It's got to go through a yellow block before it can touch a green block. And that's because those prisms there, that point does not connect to the orange block in front of it. So there's no connection there. That means damage cannot travel through that area. In most cases, flak and rails do work differently. The lock-on rocket launcher will send multiple missiles your direction, which can penetrate, but the damage per missile is still applied in the same fashion. It's got to go through the blocks in a certain order. Now the railgun, if it were to shoot that block, say it shot the middle orange block, it could go straight through to the rearmost white block in the middle, because that's what rails do. But you will encounter SMG and plasma much more as you're playing this game, so just bear that in mind. You don't want to have important things connected with a very short path that the damage can take to get to them. Like you wouldn't want a wheel connected to the orange block directly behind that red block, because your bot would you would lose a wheel at one shot. Because you can remove parts by shooting the blocks that they're attached to. You don't actually have to destroy the part. In most cases, it's easier to destroy the part. So I bore that in mind when I built the two little bots that I just popped up on the screen. There's not a whole lot of damage control you can do early on in the game because you just don't have a lot of CPU available to protect your parts and route damage in specific ways. But all the crazy shapes in that tank I just brought up, a lot of that is there to route and control damage. It's very helpful. It's something to tinker with. It comes more and more into play as you go on. But early on, it doesn't matter quite as much because you just don't have the CPU available to use enough armor to route the damage away and protect your parts. So your actual gameplay skill and tactics are they're just as important later on, but they're important early on because you can't like I couldn't wrap those wheels in blocks to protect them from being shot. I don't have enough CPU. I can't do it, and the bot would be really heavy. So you're going to wind up with a lot of exposed parts and parts that can't be protected early on with low CPU. I'm just messing around with this bot here. I was going to put some rails on it. At very low levels of gameplay, you're going to find people that have managed to build copters and other types of aircraft, and they're going to fly around and have a huge advantage over the ground bots. So you need a defense for that. And I managed to craft 4 railguns at level 3 to help defend myself against those things, but I'm going to wind up not using them on this bot. We're going to stick with the lasers. The lasers can hit the aircraft. You got to lead your targets a little bit because they are projectiles, but you're better off using a rail or two than anything because they do a lot of damage, and they can punch holes like I was talking about earlier in the aircraft. So you notice on the front of this bot, I've got the nose kind of pointed, and that's not just for aesthetics. I do think it looks cool, but that nose cone actually wasn't on there before. I put it on there because I had some spare CPU, and the way that damage works is I wanted my front wheels, which are my steering wheels, to be protected from incoming damage, as most of the time, theoretically, I'm going to be facing my enemy when I shoot them. So I wanted to have kind of a nose cone there to help to protect things, and it looks pretty cool. I like the bot better without it, but it definitely needed that extra armor in the front, especially now that I've switched this bot to a laser bot instead of plasma, because I'm going to be facing my enemies and charging right at them as I shoot them. So it's got to be able to take some damage. We've gone over damage propagation a little bit, and now we're talking about weapons, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to test this bot. There's a test area, and I want to make sure all my guns can shoot without shooting other guns that are in front of them. I want to make sure I've got good, clear line of sight from each gun so I can shoot forward. And another thing that's good to do is to see if you can shoot down at the ground, basically right in front of you, because a lot of times you're going to collide with an enemy, and they're going to try to ram you, and you're both just going to be sitting there hammering each other, and you need to be able to shoot right in front of you on the ground in a lot of cases, unless you've got like a Tesla mounted on the front of your bot. So I just tested that out. It looks like it's got good gun clearance. I can't shoot behind me very well. That's okay. If the enemies are behind me, I can more than likely outrun them unless they are an aircraft, in which case I will be able to shoot up and behind me. But I've only got 2, maybe 4 guns that can see behind me to shoot if I need to flee. So now I'm going to check out my tank. This tank I built at level 3, and we're going to try to join a match, and we're going to see how well it does, what this tank can do in battle. We'll keep on blabbering about different topics, very basic beginner stuff as we wait here. So at level 3 I was able to scrap a bunch of parts. Stuff like masks, mask sides you get, and pieces of cosmetics like the cockpit parts and stuff like that. They're pretty rare, so when you recycle them you get a fair amount of robots back out of it. And it's nice early on to be able to say, hey, you know, I don't need this. There's no sense in holding on to it right now, and you can forge the parts that you need by recycling them and then making the other stuff that you actually need, because you're not going to need the left jaw of a mask this early in the game. It's just, there's no point in holding on to that. You'll get it again later. They're not all that uncommon to drop when you play a large number of games. So we've got our tank. We've got 2 rails on the back because my first 2 matches I played as a new player at level 1 and 2, there were several helicopters on the enemy team, and as a plasma bot and laser wasp user, you don't have an effective way to fight back against those plasma copters. Now I could do it because I've been playing this game since 2014 and I use plasma a lot. I know how it works. Just like right there, I was talking about earlier how enemies are going to charge right at you. You will encounter that a lot, and that's what happened there. So anyway, I put a couple rails on the back of this, and they're really helpful to have early on. And I've got them at level 3, and I didn't get anything spectacular part-wise. So they can be forged. You just have to pick and choose the parts that you recycle. The most valuable ones are the ones that give you a lot of robits. You only get a 25% return rate on whatever you recycle, so it takes 4 items of one quality to get 1 item of the same quality back out of it. So it can be pretty grindy if you're looking for a specific type of build. So luckily I wound up with a piece of a cockpit and a piece of a mask I could go ahead and recycle, and those are pretty valuable in terms of robits, so I was able to get several thousand robits out of a handful of items. I also recycled a large electro shield. It used a fair amount of CPU. I'm not going to need that this early in the match. It will cut down my options later, but as I play I'm going to get more and more crates and more items and have more chances to get those items back. So early on I felt like it was a good idea to focus on just recycling those more expensive parts, and when I need them later we'll cross that bridge when I come to it. For now I need to make a good bot that can carry me through these early levels of gameplay, especially against these copters and stuff. So we're going to shoot some plasma at this guy. That's one of the benefits of the mech legs. I don't like using them. I don't have a lot of fun, but they are very durable early game parts, and they're durable end game parts. There are kind of exploitative builds that use a whole bunch of those suckers, and I kind of call them a cancer to the game because they are. But early on, if you're looking for durability, the mech legs are a good choice because they're really easy to build with, and they've got their own built-in electro shields which absorb damage and will regenerate if they haven't taken any damage within, I think it's a 10-second cooldown. So there's another case, again, quickly switching topics, where a guy rammed me and he was right in my face, and I was able to shoot down right in front of me and kill him. I do have a Tesla on the front of my bot. I just didn't activate it. It does have a slight activation delay, and I didn't want to waste time having it activate only to have the guy shoot it off right after it activated. So there's a little tip to think about. I am going to play with it later on. I make some kind of silly decisions, but I really want to Tesla some people because I'm not very good at it. So here we go. We're going to Tesla this guy. As you can see, it deals damage in bursts. Every so often it'll deal X amount of damage based on whatever level it is, whatever class of Tesla it is. And that damage, like I mentioned earlier in the tutorial, will travel like electricity. You saw how it chewed the guy's bot up bit by bit, kind of in rows, as the damage traveled through his bot. And that's how damage works with most weapons. Later on in the game you'll encounter some weapons called arrow flak, which deals large area of effect explosions, and it'll hit multiple blocks at once. Rails, like I said, they penetrate straight through, which is why it's good to equip a couple of them, at least at very minimum 1 early on, so you can hit those, so you can hit the aircraft with them and punch holes right through them. Plasma's a good weapon. It's got area of effect damage. If you miss a little, there's some splash that will hit the enemies. Very helpful for that. It's got good, fairly decent projectile speed. It's not super fast, but it does the job. And we're just going to get in here and we're going to brawl with these guys. He sees me coming with my Teslas open and tried to jump over it. And I just waited. That was bad. don't just sit there and wait. But I did it because I wanted to get him with the Teslas, and I figured my tank could hold up to a couple more seconds of gunfire. And if you've noticed on the back of my tank, I've got these lines of blocks with space in between, and that's so the damage can't travel. It's so I can control where the damage goes by leaving those spaces. And let's see, I'm showing you mech legs right now. Those things, they're really durable. They can take multiple rail shots and stay attached to the bot. They can jump. They have a lot of pros, and they have few cons, actually. Their movement speed is not terrible. It's pretty decent. They can jump, they can strafe, and they are very durable. So they make a very good choice early on because they're very easy to build with. You can literally make a cube of blocks on top of 2 legs and do pretty well with it. Good players can do well with anything, but even poor players can do well with mech legs because they're so durable. All you gotta do is just stack a whole bunch of guns on them, and you got it. If you notice, what I did there was I shot him with the rail, but we only have 2, so our fire rate is going to be really, really slow if you only have 1 or 2 rails. So you don't want to just sit there scoped in waiting for your next shot. You can switch back to your other weapon and fire some more in between, and that's what I did there. So there's a victory. It was kind of CO clubbing, even though we're on totally even terms. This is a brand new account of mine, but I do know how the game is played, and we won. So there's some basics of the game. Thanks for watching.